Hi, today we will be learning about equivalent fractions. What are equivalent fractions? They are fractions with different numerators and denominators, but are equal in size. What does this mean? Let's look at some examples. So if you remember, equivalent fractions are fractions that have different numerators and denominators, but are the same size. So how do we use some manipulatives to help us? So you might see, I've seen these manipulatives before. These are called fraction discs. Okay, so now we need our fractions to be equal in size. So let's start off with half. Okay, so I have half here. Now I want to find another fraction that is equivalent to half. That means that it is the same size as half. Okay, so let's try. Let's try using 1/3. If I put 1/3, okay, we can see that they are definitely not the same size. So let's try putting another 1/3. It's still not the same size. And now it is already bigger than half. So I know that 1/3 cannot work for this. So let's try 1/4 now. Okay, it's still smaller than half. Let's try to add another quarter. Okay, so if we can see, it is the same size. So in this situation, I can say half is equivalent to 2/4. And where did I get 2/4 from? Because I have 2 pieces of 1/4. So that becomes 2/4. So if I say that these two fractions are equivalent, I can use an equal sign. Okay. So now let's try other fractions. Let's try a 1/5. Okay, it's still too small, so I'm going to add some more. Okay, but now it's too big. So I know that the denominator 5 does not work. Okay, let's try 1/6. Okay, we can see that it works. So I can also write half is equivalent to 3/6. Okay, because there are 3 pieces of 1/6. Now let's try to find one more. Okay. So maybe now let's try to use 10. Okay, so let me put. Okay, so if you can see, they are the same size. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So I can say half is equivalent to 5/10. But if you notice, in this case, it's a bit hard to tell that it is exactly half. Okay, because we are looking at it side by side, we might not be able to tell that it is exact. So other than using a fraction disk, we can use another manipulative called a fraction bar. Okay, so a fraction bar looks something like this. Okay, so if I'm using half, and I want to check that 2/4 is equivalent to half, I can put here, and you can see that they are the same length. So this might be easier to tell. And if I want to use my denominator as 6, okay, let me remove this. You can tell that they are still the same length. And let's check. For the denominator 10, just now it was not very clear to us. So let's check if this might be clearer. Okay, so you can see here, it is quite clear that they are the same length. So we know that half can be equivalent to 2/4, 3/6, or 5/10. Do you notice a pattern here? Okay, actually, there is a pattern. So from half, let's say we want to get 2/4. We actually multiply our numerator and denominator by 2. What about 3/6? What do you think I'll multiply my numerator and denominator by? Okay, I will multiply it by 3. And last but not least, 5/10. I will multiply by 5. So to get equivalent fractions, we actually multiply our numerator and denominator by the same number. So it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be 5, it can be 4, it can be 6, it can be 7, 8. Okay, it doesn't matter as long as my numerator and denominator are both multiplied by the same number. Okay, now let's try a different fraction. Okay, so let's go back to the fraction this. Now let's say I want to do 1/3. Okay, so now I want to use 1/4 to check. Can you see that it's very difficult for me to compare the size? Because if I do it side by side, it might not be so easy to tell. So this is especially so if let's say I use maybe 1/5. So it's a bit difficult for me to tell whether these two fractions are the same size. So it is easier to use the fraction bars. Okay, so now let's try. Now I have 1/3. Okay, so let me write 1/3 here. Okay, if I have 1/3, let's try to see how to get equivalent fractions, which means that they are the same length. Okay, so now there's no point to do half because it's already bigger. So we should go to 1/4. Okay, this one is too short and this one is too long. So we know that quarters are not going to be the answer here. Okay, let's try 1/5. This one was the one that was difficult to tell using the fraction this. Okay, but here you can tell quite easily that they are not equal. Now let's try 1/6. Okay, can you tell that they are the same length? This means that 1/3 is the same as 2/6. Okay, let's try some more. Okay, this one is wrong. Let's try 1/10. Okay, it also doesn't work. And if I try 1/12, okay, we can see that it's the same length. So in this case, 1/3 is equivalent to 4/12. So using the same result that we got previously, we know that we're supposed to multiply our numerator and denominator by the same number. So in this case, can we tell what number we're supposed to multiply? Okay, we're supposed to multiply by 2. And in this case, can we tell what number to multiply by? Okay, we multiply by 4. So, in summary, when we are trying to find equivalent fractions, we multiply our numerator and denominator by the same number. Okay. So now let me erase this first. Okay, what happens if I need to find the first 3 equivalent fractions of, let's say, 1/4? If I need to find the first 3 equivalent fractions, the first one is always to multiply by 2. Because if I multiply by 1, I'm just going to get my numerator as 1 and denominator is 4, which is the same fraction as what I had previously. So to get the first equivalent fraction, I would multiply my numerator by 2 and my denominator by 2. That will give me 2/8. How do I get the second equivalent fraction? To get the second equivalent fraction, okay, so I can either write it at the bottom, so I can either write it like this. Okay, my next one will be to multiply by 3. I can either write it like this, or I can write it as part of the same equation, and then I'll write it like this. Okay, please take note, if the question tells us to find the equivalent fractions of 1/4, we always multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number. And when we multiply, we always multiply it to the fraction that we were given, which is 1/4. So we don't multiply it to 2/8. We will multiply it to 1/4. So if you see here, I multiplied 1 and 4 by 3. I did not multiply anything to 2/8. Okay? So they asked me to find 3 equivalent fractions. So I have 2/8, 3/12, and I can find one more. So if I multiply by 2 already, and then 3, can you tell what's the next number I should multiply by? So next, I will multiply by 4. So what's 1 times 4? 4. And what's 4 times 4? 16. So this would be the first 3 equivalent fractions of 1/4. 1/4 itself is not counted. So the first 3 equivalent fractions are 2/8, 3/12, and 4/16. Okay, last but not least, what happens if they ask me to find equivalent fractions of a fraction whose numerator is not 1? So just now we looked at half, 1/3, and 1/4. What happens if I need to find the equivalent fractions of 2/5? Okay, it is exactly the same thing. So my first equivalent fraction will be to multiply my numerator by 2 and my denominator by 2. So this will give me 4/10. Okay, and similarly, the next equivalent fraction will be to multiply by 3. Okay, and then I can continue on. Okay, so there's no difference. The steps are exactly the same, no matter what our starting fraction is. It doesn't have to have a numerator 1. It can be any fraction. Okay, and the steps will still be the same. We still multiply our numerator and denominator by the same number.